Welcome to Colonie TV, the Town of Colonie government channel.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round again, the years keep rolling by.
Greetings and good cheer. I'm Joe Doolittle.
And I'm Kate Dudding.
And this is Story by Story.
Sharing the human experience.
Welcome, and we're so pleased that you're joining us for an hour of storytelling and conversations about, well, mostly about storytelling. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of introduction and framing of this program. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to introduce a wonderful, wonderful, charming, and fascinating guest storyteller.
One of my favorite people, really.
She can't be your favorite people because she's my favorite people.
I think we can share that, Joe.
Oh, okay. We share a favorite with Betty McCanty, and we'll introduce her in a minute. But you know, this has just been a blur of a summer, Kate. It's gone by, for me anyway.
Okay, and what consists of that?
Well, it just went by really fast. I had a lot of things going on early in the summer or late in the spring, and the hurry up for them, and what was my 45th college reunion? That's a lot. That's a lot of years. And then I took a deep breath, and all of a sudden, here we are in August, and you're watching us in September. So that was what the was.
Well, a friend of mine once said, one day it's Memorial Day, and the next week it's Labor Day.
Now, that's true. That's true. Although, you know, I haven't done a lot of storytelling, but I've really listened to some good stories, mm-hmm. and I told a couple times, kind of related to Schoharie mm-hmm. and the relief effort that's still going on down there. And if you go to schoharierelief.org, you'll hear those. You'll see some of those stories. You can read them, and you can even have a clip.
Schoharie Recovery?
schoharierecovery.org.
Yeah, I think you said relief. Okay.
Okay. schoharierecovery.org, because for our area, I think the bring back and the restoration of community that's going on in the mm-hmm. Schoharie Valley and in Rotterdam Junction is really a testament to the spirit of this region. And I encourage you to continue to help out, because the helping is still a need. And if you want a great story, there's a link to one of our other favorite storytellers, Ken Bushman, who tells a story about being involved in rebuilding community and homes in Schoharie. Mm-hmm. And I commend that story to you on our website as well, which is
storycircle@proctors.org, and click on YouTube.
Yep.
And that would be listed under Personal Stories, Lost Tools of Schoharie. And could you pass me what I just gave you, so I could just
I mean
borrow it back?
Is this an Indian gift you're doing?
I think that's politically incorrect, Joe.
A Native American gift?
No,
I'm sorry. No,
that's even worse, I think.
Dig myself a hole.
Do you want to ask me what I've been doing?
You know, this summer's been for me. How about you, Kate? What you been doing?
Yes, it's been for me, because I've been recording my third CD, Young People Who Made a Difference. And yesterday I spent assembling about 80 of them.
Wow.
I work with Barry Marshall of the Story Crafters, and he sends me the pieces, and I assemble them. That's the way he works. So.
You had to put in the cover and the backs and all that.
First you open it up, and then you put in the back sheet, and then you put in the black insert, and then you put in the front sheet, and you make sure that everything is there, and of course put in the CD. Anyways. It's a little.
Now the important thing in the course of our seasons, you may have heard Kate tell some of these stories, but there are some wonderful favorites of mine. There's that story about the young girl who could draw some. What was the opening line to that story?
Well, 11 years old and willing to help.
That's right.
She was appalled by the spill in the Gulf of Mexico, and she wrote the Audubon Society suggesting that since she was a good drawer, that she could draw some pictures and donate them to give them to people who donated money to the cleanup. So she has, I won't give the,
Right.
but she said, I promised that I would draw up to 500 watercolor paintings if there was the demand, but I never thought there would be. Well, there was. So she drew 500 paintings of 120 different species of birds. She really loves birds. OliviaBowler.net, Bowler, if you want to find out more about her. Or you could just go to my website, katedudding.com/youngpeople, and I tell a little bit about each of the stories on my CD and give you links to go find out more about each of them.
And if one wanted to purchase,
that's the same place to go.
Same place. How about that for a segue? Hey, good, huh? Now, the important element here, I think, is that Kate has captured that essence of the spirit that I was talking about earlier in young people who are contributing in ways that one wouldn't normally think a young person would be able to make contributions at these levels. Mm-hmm. And it's a collection of extraordinary, and I use the term extraordinary in all its meanings, stories about the next generation. And
in some cases, the previous generation. Two of the stories date back to the Civil Rights era, when 18-year-olds and then even younger high school students really put their lives on the line for what they were either thrust into or what they believed in.
So if we haven't got your interest piqued with this conversation, then we're really not storytellers.
Thank you for listening to my little promo.
Have you been doing anything else? What have you been doing in your spare time?
In my spare time? Well, I went to the National Storytelling Conference in Cincinnati. I was there mostly as a attendee, but I was taped telling a story from my second CD about the young Pakistani carpet weaver who made a difference, Iqbal Masih.
Now, why were you taped? Why was that story taped? What happened to that little recording?
Susan O'Halloran from Chicago, she has dedicated her life to using story to create bridges between the races. And so she has an organization called Race Bridges .org, I think. But she has been running a real festival of, people come, hear people tell on a platform for 9 years called Just Stories, stories about justice. Mm-hmm. And this year she's decided to do an online one using Facebook. So August 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, a new video popped up every half an hour. And most of the times the storytellers were there to type chat.
To chat.
With anyone who was watching it. The videos are still up, so you can go to Facebook. It's Just Stories. And I think there were 70 videos. I
think there's some really great, including Kate's, stories about social justice. And I commend that to you. And Kate, it was really great for all of us in this area that you got to be one of those tellers, because it was really a very high caliber performance, and also a great experiment in the ways that storytelling is trying to use this new media, this funny stuff with the cameras and those kinds of things.
Right, because I always think of storytelling as a very intimate art form. The way she tried to capture it is, we were filmed, so it was a really tight close-up.
I think this is a very intimate
many of my
look,
gestures were, you just kind of, they flitted in and out. Luckily, an important gesture, they were within the frame. But when I was listening to some people, I made it full screen, and I have a big computer monitor, and it was like, particularly, I remember Michael Parent was like, "Ooh, here he is, right here."
It's kind of an in-your-face in-your-face kind of storytelling
Yes.
that I wasn't used to until once you settle into it, then you really kind of like it.
Yeah.
But the first look at your eyeballs was a whole other thing, I'll tell you. I just wanted to know.
Yeah, we're not recommending, Greg, that you necessarily do this for us. Thank you.
We have a lot of things coming up because September begins our respective season of storytelling. We're going to cover that in a bit, but we've invited one of the princesses of storytelling.
Queen.
No, I was going to call her princess. She's not old enough to be a queen. Well, she's royalty. She's royalty.
Yes.
Betty McCanty was an English teacher, and maybe not.
Language teacher.
Language teacher.
Yeah.
Well, English is a language.
I know, but that's not the one she taught.
Okay. She was a teacher. She was a mom.
She still is.
She still is a mom. She has 8 children. She has grandchildren and more grandchildren. But when I first met Betty, from the very first look at her and the first listen to her, I knew that she was a storyteller. And I have been enchanted to be around her many times since that first meeting. And we're so pleased that you're here all the way from Saratoga Springs to share your story and a little bit of your own story with us. Welcome, Betty McCanty.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Now, you know, we have many things we could start on, but we'd like to just ask people, you know, how they discovered they was a storyteller. And when did that happen for you? I mean, you probably had opportunities, but when did you realize you were a storyteller?
Well, I sort of backed into it because I had heard about Sagamore Institute up in the mountains, and I wanted to go up there. And I saw a thing on the bulletin board that said, Sagamore Institute, we're going to be telling stories. Storytelling? I had never heard about it. But I thought, well, at about the same time, they were having a workshop on using humor in the classroom. And I thought, oh, that I know about. So I guess I'll go up there. So I sent my check in, and they called me up and they said, well, we're not going to teach the one about humor. We're going to teach the one about storytelling. I said, well, I never heard about that. So, well, just just tear up the check. And they said, oh, no, if you'd like humor in the classroom, you'd love storytelling. And I said, well, I'll give it a whirl. So I soon got a letter from Janine Laverty, who has been my mentor, and she said, please come and bring with you a story that can be told in 5 or 10 minutes. Well, I had no idea of how to choose a story or how to time a story, but my daughter said, well, Michael has a little picture book, and it's about Ireland. Well, anything about Ireland is dear to my heart. And so I said, well, I'll take that. And the idea was to become familiar with it, but not to learn it. And so I went up in the mountains, and sure enough, I fell in love with storytelling. And it changed my life. I just can't tell you how much it has meant to me.
Can you share just one of the ways you think your life has been different because you're a storyteller?
Well, as we have said, I have a big family, and mostly that's what I did. I was doing some storytelling or some teaching at the time, but mostly substituting, and that was not fulfilling. But then when I got into storytelling, a whole thing opened up about people all over the world, about people doing things to help other people, to doing things that resulted in changes in countries. It was like a light turned on, and there it was. And so at first, when I was still working, I only learned 1 or 2 stories a year. But after I retired, and I had all this time, because I don't like to golf, and I don't like to play bridge or any other games, oh, it was wonderful. I could read a story and think, oh, I could share that story. And that's the way it's been. I've been retired since 1988, and so I've learned a lot of stories.
Wow. That's a pretty good story. Now, what we'd like you to do, and we're going to come back and talk more about Betty McCanty, but we'd love for you to tell us a story.
Oh, I'd be happy to.
And then we're going to we'll kind of debrief that story, but we're really looking forward to hearing what your tale is.
All right. I'll tell you a story about, and it's called Hemball Salve. And it was collected by Vaughn Ward, who's a wonderful folklorist. And she has it in one of her books, which is called Harvey Carr, Harvey Carr, Harvey Carr. Well, you know, in the old days, they didn't have a drugstore on every corner. In fact, a lot of small towns didn't have any kind of a drugstore at all. So people made their own medicaments and lotions and potions. My mother used to make poultices. She'd take some used cloth of some sort, and she'd make a mixture of flour and lard, and then she'd put in some kind of an irritant, like hot mustard or ground ginger or something like that. And then she'd put it between those two pieces of cloth and slap it on whatever hurt. And you'd pretend that you were well because you didn't want that anywhere near you. And so people thought that the poultices were doing the work. But actually, whoo-wee. And my father-in-law was a country doctor, and he was famous for a cough syrup that he made on the kitchen stove. He had a special pot for it, and he put in all the different things, and he'd stir it with a stick, and he called it croupies. And people would come, even after he retired, people would knock on the door and say, "Can I get some of that croupies?" Well, Harvey Carr, up in the mountains, decided that he wanted some salve. Now, if he lived down in the city, he probably would have bought the salve from a Boy Scout who was selling cloverine salve in a little tin container, and they came door to door to door to sell the cloverine salve. But he was up in the mountains and he was on his own. So he had a bucket and he went out in the woods and he got the inside bark of a hemlock tree. And then he saw a stand of balsam, and they each had globules. They were sticky and they were fragrant. So he took a bunch of those globules and put it in a bucket with the bark that he already had in there, and then he put in some herbs and stuff, and he took it home and he put it on the stove, put water in and some spices, and he had a sturdy stick, and he put it on the back burner and let it cook gently for 2 or 3 days, and he'd give it a stir every now and then. And then when he pronounced it ready, he put it in a crock. Well, he went out to chop his wood, and he's going with an axe, and it went right into his leg, and oh, it hurt like a son of a gun. Oh, and he went in, and he got some of the hemball salve, hem from hemlock and ball from balsam, and he put it on there and rubbed it. Instantaneous cure. Well, he was using it for everything that was broken, from broken wood things, to broken windows, to broken bones, all kinds of things. He just thought that was wonderful stuff. So that, it was, well, getting along in the fall, and a time to get his wood in for the winter, and he's out there chopping and chopping and chopping, and his dog came along, Spot. And Spot thought it was some new kind of a game, and he's running around, and Harvey's chopping and chopping. He said, "Get out, Spot, get, you're going to get hurt, get." He chopped down and chopped Spot's tail right off. Oh, Harvey cried. Oh, he wouldn't have hurt that dog for the world. He loved Spot so. And Spot was yelping and yelling, and so Harvey picked him up, carried him in the house, and laid him on the kitchen table, and went and got some of that hemball salve and put it on the stump, and he rubbed and he rubbed and he rubbed and he rubbed and he rubbed, and he rubbed a new tail. It was a beautiful tail, came right up over the back of Spot. Oh, he never looked better. Well, the winter came, and it was a long, hard winter, the way winters are apt to be up in the North Country. And at the first sign of spring, Harvey went out to clean up the mess in the yard. He had wood chips and sawdust and all kinds of stuff. And he had his broom, and he's sweeping and sweeping and sweeping. And he looked down and he saw something, and he couldn't figure out what it was. It looked like something from maybe an animal. Or he kicked at it and he kicked at it, and he looked again, and he finally kicked at it, got it up out of the frost. It was what was left of Spot's tail. So he brought it in the house and he laid it on the table, and he got the hemball salve and he rubbed it and he rubbed it and he rubbed it and he turned it over and he rubbed it and he rubbed it and he rubbed it. And he rubbed a new dog. And it was a beautiful dog, just as good looking as Spot and just as nice a dog.
Thank you, Betty McCanty. I think.
Is that a Shaggy Dog story?
I don't think she said it was a shaggy dog.
No, a shaggy dog, a very beautiful dog.
Now, you kind of touched on a couple of points of historical meaning for us. Who was Harvey Carr? Can you kind of give a little
He
profile
was
of
one
that?
of the best storytellers in the North Country. He belonged to a group called the Liars Club. And the Liars Club was a group that was gathered by Vaughn Ward when she was up in the North Country gathering stories. And there was Joe Bruchac and Daddy Dick and Bill Smith, and of course Harvey Carr. And Vaughn Ward said, in her opinion, Harvey Carr was the best of the storytellers, that he had the ability to hear a story and warehouse it in his brain, never forgetting. And anytime he needed a story, he'd pull out one of those stories that he had heard years ago, and he'd change the name of the people or the place or something like that, and he'd tell that all over, and people came from everywhere to hear him tell. Yeah. He was, and he thought that Blue Mountain Lake, where he lived, was heaven on earth. The way he told it, it was wonderful. And he'd say, well, you know, of course, there were times when we didn't have electricity or paved roads or anything, but now we even have telephones up in Blue Mountain Lake, and you ought to come up and see it. It's a wonderful place. What, he was a one-man chamber of commerce. And rightly so.
Well, except for the black fly season and the long winter.
No, he didn't mention that. And the long winters were just fine because you could refine your stories over the winter, you know, and be all ready when the spring came and people began to get together again.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you went up to the Sagamore, that great Adirondack camp, were some of the members of the Liars Club in the workshop or teaching, or did you meet these guys live?
The people that were there to learn more about how to tell stories, how to add details to your stories, how to use your voice in different ways. At one time, I was told to think of a two-word or two-name appellation and shout it across the lake, and all I could think of was Harry Horseface. Why that came to me, I don't know. But all the creatures up there at Sagamore Lake, I'm yelling, Harry Horseface, trying to get the H to come out properly. And everybody's looking at me. Where did she come up with that? And Lord only knows.
Lord only knows.
Now, was that the meeting that Becky Holder and Nancy Gifford and Lois Foyt Hodges were at?
And Tom Weekly. I had quite an experience. I had never met any of these people. I had no contact with storytelling at all. Didn't know a thing about it. But when I got there, I needed to use the ladies' room. And I was so impressed with Sagamore. They had all kinds of artifacts around. Everything was in tune with the theme of the place. And I thought, isn't this wonderful? Somebody's given a lot of thought to the pictures on the wall and the dressing on the beds, and everything had to do with the lakes and the Adirondacks. And when I went into the ladies' room, here was a stump of a tree, about this big. And I thought, no, imagine even dressing up the ladies' room. That's wonderful. So I sat down, and all of a sudden a door began to swing open. And Tom Weekly was standing there. And he said, well, good morning, and reached in and closed the door. It seems that stump was there to hold the door closed. But what did I know? I'd never been in the mountains before in my life, and I didn't know about things like using a stump in such a way.
I see. And that artifact that came in and opened the door, Tom Weekly, did he look like he was from the Adirondacks? Or did...
Well, he pretended he was. He could make you believe anything. And to this day, he tells stories, and I say, oh, I don't know how you lived through that. And he said, I got it out of a book.
Making them real.
But boy, yes, and making them real by adding the details and the pauses and the using the voice and pauses and things like that. He's a master at it.
And because of your time in the Adirondacks as a student, you have an affinity for Adirondack stories, and then you spent most of your adult life in Ballston Spa, so you're kind of in the foothills?
No, I was born and raised in Buffalo, New York, and didn't come to Ballston Spa until my husband was ready to start his dental practice.
Okay.
That's how we came there. Okay. And I had never been really in eastern New York at all. My family didn't travel much. They tended to stay in and around Buffalo.
Buffalo people tend to stay around Buffalo.
Yeah. Going as far as Niagara Falls.
Oh, of course, you go as far as Niagara Falls.
So that when you came east, you became more acquainted with the Adirondacks and that whole
and fell in love with them. The first time I ever saw them, I was absolutely amazed, and I said, "This is where I want to live." Very different.
And then years later, Betty and I met at another one of Janine's workshops, then at Brant Lake.
Yes.
Yes.
And that was in a beautiful place that belonged to the Episcopal Church. They since sold it and bought another equally lovely place. But it was wonderful to be able to work on stories in such a place. At one point, when I was up at Sagamore Lake, I was working on a story that was beautiful. It was beautifully written, had lovely words. And I was stuck on those words, and I couldn't get my own personality into the story at all because I thought it was such a gorgeous piece of writing. And so Janine said, I want you to go out in the woods and shout just the facts. No other words, just the facts. What happened? And so I went out and did you
just go out and yell Harry Horsehead or whatever, just for old time's sake, or what?
No, I just told the facts of the story. It was called The Kith of the Elf Folk, and it was a beautiful, beautiful story. And so I was just yelling the facts, and I heard two people talking, and I moved a little closer to the lake, and there was a man and apparently his father, and they were sitting in a fishing boat, just sitting. And I looked at them, and they said, "Oh, go on, we want to hear you." And I was mortified. And they said, "Oh no, it's just wonderful to hear stories out here in nature." You know, and they would have loved the story as it was originally written with all those beautiful words, but they loved the story itself. And that gave me courage to then take the story back to its bones and add what only was necessary and not be hog-tied by these words. You have to watch that, you know. But that was a great place because you could do these things and you didn't have to worry about how you sounded or whether people were going to take you to the funny farm or anything like that, you know. It was expected there.
One of the questions that a storyteller often gets is, well, where do you get your stories? And if they're personal stories, they ask, well, did that really happen? Or, but you've actually described a very important element for storytelling, and that is adapting whatever the story is to your own persona and your own voice. And because then when you tell it, it's you. It isn't Robert Louis Stevenson, or it isn't whoever. It's Betty McCanty telling that story, because you've acquired the story, and in some respects, it's acquired you.
That's right. It has that's exactly true. It takes you. You are now not just yourself, but you are part of something bigger.
Yeah.
Janine, I think Janine describes it as you're developing a relationship with your story, which the first time I heard it, I kind of went woo, 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 woo. But she has a series of exercises which now include listing the facts and beginning, middle, end. That's always good to know in the story, what the beginning, the middle, and the end is, right. And then playing with those, seeing their relationships. And
as my wife says, please remember there's an end, because I just finished listening to you. Just to be good.
Janine told me once after I told this opus, for some reason, I don't know if you were there this weekend, that particular weekend, I decided to create a story on the history of the measurement of time. I found lots of little anecdotes of these really nifty things that back in the time of Aristotle and Plato, one of them had an alarm clock that was running water filled up a vessel, and when the vessel became full, there was like an arm, like in your toilet tank, that when the level came up, it would come up and it released marbles that fell on a metal plate. And that was the alarm clock. And you just had to make your vessel big enough and get the arm positioned and matching it with the water flow to have it. See, wasn't that fascinating?
A number of things went off in my mind, but I'm not going to go where they
Okay, well, anyways, Janine took me aside after I went through various things like that and said, Kate, I feel I need to tell you something that Mrs. Melville said to her husband after reading Moby Dick. I said, oh? He said, yes. She asked him, was there anything that you learned about whales that you didn't put in this book? Okay, this is more a residency, 5 or 6 stories kind of thing. But the next day I had flipped it around and changed the focus to how I taught my son about time, and then how he taught me about time. So I was able to put in some of these marvelous contraptions that I found out, but with a personal framework, which worked much better than.
So that not only you adapt the story and the story adapt you, but you wrestled for a bit.
Oh yes. Okay. Oh yes. Sometimes it's I'm why do I want to tell it? I don't know. What's the most important part? I don't know.
Well, I'm going to put our conversation on pause for just a little bit, and we're going to talk about how you can get in relationship with storytelling. And there are a wonderful collection of opportunities coming up this fall. And the first one I want to suggest is that you join the Story Circle. For $10 a year, you can get our newsletters and listserv and show up at our monthly meetings here at the Colonie Library. And it's a wonderful way just to check in.
Mm-hmm. We also meet at the Pine Hills branch of the Albany Public Library.
So we meet once a month in addition to the other things you're going to hear about, and that's Story Circle.
Story-circle.org.
That's our
But
website.
I've got to put the new meetings up. Okay.
All right. So that's join us, pure and simple. And then we've got the kickoff of our fifth. Well, we actually have a continuation of a summer series in the weekend after Labor Day. That's Sunday after Labor Day, at Schoharie Crossing State Historic Site, just out Route 5 past Amsterdam, Route 5S. In Fort Hunter is one of the most idyllic spots to hear stories. It's almost as good as the Sagamore. And the Story Crafters.
No, on September 9th, Andy Davis is going to be there, I believe.
Well,
The Story Crafters were there the end of August.
okay, so that Andy Davis is a storyteller from New Hampshire. He's well known in New England, and we're looking forward to having him over on our side of the border. So 6 o'clock, bring a picnic, show up at 5 o'clock and have your picnic, and at 6 o'clock, listen to Andy Davis.
And then we'll be starting our 6th season at Proctor's with word plays, which is what we just call our series for adults. We meet in the gallery, which is on the 2nd floor above the box office. There are elevators just in this box office area that you can take up, and you just take a quick left and there we are. And this year we're doing a different way of putting our programs together. Joe and I came up with some titles, and we asked the members of Story Circle to say what stories they had that fit the titles. So it'll be a potpourri of storytellers, all telling stories on the same theme. And we open our season on September 23rd at 2 p.m. with a program called The Other F Words.
And I want to go on the record that Kate thought that one up.
Well, I found it. That friends of mine were...
My wife accused me of you know what. So at any rate.
Yes.
But it's going to be fun, and we've got some really good stories that have been submitted in response to that. And if you're really curious, then please join us on September 23rd. That's at Proctor's in downtown Schenectady. The Green Market, the farmers market, is still going on outdoors. So you can graze that Green Market in front of City Hall, walk down J Street, and right into our Proctor's Theater. And we have another tradition that we have started in that we're actually doing our programming at Proctor's in partnership with the food pantry at the Schenectady Inner City Ministry. So there are special group rates available for those member congregations, and $1 of every ticket is going to go to the Sikkim Food Pantry. So if you want to get a group together and come to word plays, it's also going to benefit the food pantry. So we're pleased with that partnership, and a lot of what we do has a community benefit aspect to it, and we're pleased to do this one.
Mm-hmm. And then we'll be starting our 14th season at the Glenn Sanders Mansion with our 99th program.
Our 99th program.
On Sunday, September 30th at 5 p.m. Love stories, more or less, with nationally acclaimed storyteller Elizabeth Ellis.
Now, Elizabeth Ellis is a dear friend of storytelling, and of several of us who have known her professionally and personally and through workshops. And she is not to be missed. But she has a little aspect of a love story, even though she's from Texas, that's local.
Yes, this summer she was here because her grandson, whom she raised, was getting married in the Rose Garden in Schenectady. His fiancée is from Watertown, but she has an aunt who lives in the area. And they decided, rather than dragging all the people up to Watertown, that getting married in Schenectady was a better idea.
And it was one of those little love stories that came bubbling up right in our neighborhood. And Elizabeth from Texas came all the way up and stayed actually with Kate and celebrated the wedding.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And this picture of her is actually from the wedding. And she had one friend, Geraldine Buckley from the D.C. area. When she heard about it, she said, "Oh, would you like to borrow something from me? Because I have this top that I think would look good on you, and I have this necklace that goes with it." And once Elizabeth tried it on, Geraldine said, "Elizabeth, I'd like to give it to you." And Elizabeth said, "Oh no, I couldn't." She said, "Elizabeth, I got it from eBay. It wasn't, you know."
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And then she had another friend, Jeannie Beekman, I've forgotten her last name, from Texas, who she said is the person to consult on fashion. And so Elizabeth brought this to some gathering they were both going to be at, and she tried on the necklace and the top, and walk back. Okay. What you want is a dove gray dress that has a neckline that drops to here, so to show off the necklace properly. And the shoes you want should be a little darker. The color for them should be pewter. And Jeannie Piscini Beckman. I don't think I have it. Anyways. And so you can't see, but that's exactly what she got and exactly what she wore, and she was gorgeous. Probably too much information, but it just sort of.
Is there anything about Elizabeth Ellis? You didn't put it that straight.
Oh yes.
Okay.
Oh yes.
I'm sorry. I could not let that one go.
And of course she's wearing yellow roses because the yellow rose of
Texas.
Texas.
Well, the short version of that is that there's a lot going on in September with storytelling, and Elizabeth Ellis is going to be one of the highlights of our season, so don't miss her.
She's one of the, I think there are 40 members of the Circle of Excellence within the National Storytelling Network. So that's a great honor within the storytelling world to be a member of that. That means you've been telling wonderful stories for 30 years. I mean, I don't think the qualifications say quite that, but that's pretty much what it means. So.
And we also have kind of a bibliography or a library of great storytellers on our website, don't we, Kate?
Yes, that from this program I've cut out the stories, and now we have over 70 stories on our website. Go to storycircleofproctors.org and click on YouTube. And they're categorized: humorous, personal, historical, literary, maybe something else. And we have almost 12,000 stories have been watched in the year and a half they've been available.
Wow. Now, Kate, I heard you say that we were going to have our 99th Story Sunday in September. That means that in October, we're going to go into triple figures, right? We're going to have our 100th Story Sunday.
Yes, indeed we are.
Now, is that going to be a special commemoration?
Of course it is, Joe. And you know more about it than I do, because you asked Janine Laverty, whom we were just speaking about, and Becky Holder to come back.
And we asked them to come back because Janine and Becky were the lead-off storytellers for the first ever Story Sunday. And we thought it would be just wonderful if they were back at the 100th. Mm-hmm. So we're going to celebrate them, and we're going to celebrate the series. And if you come, we're going to celebrate you. So stay tuned for the details on that on next month's show. And we'll look forward to seeing you at one of our productions or around the table at one of our Story Circle meetings. Mm-hmm.
Now, if you'd like to help, as with all arts organizations, our ticket sales do not cover our expenses. You can become a patron of Story Circle at Proctor's. This is the second year we're doing it. Last year we raised enough money to pay for 85% of our expenses at Proctor's. And so that was a wonderful deal, because that meant all of our storytellers got something. Sometimes it was only $30, which is, what do you call an honorarium that is that small? A virtual honorarium.
Virtual.
Yes.
Not much.
Yes.
Not much.
We would like to pay the storytellers what they're worth.
And we do encourage you to provide just a little bit of wherewithal for us to do the production side of this artistic endeavor. We think it's important. It's structured to connect with the community in a relationship way, like we've described our ties to the Sikkim Food Pantry. So in addition to that, if there's something that Story Circle and storytellers can do for your community building, please think about us and perhaps browse our website to see topics and storytellers that might be appropriate for programs.
And your contribution is, Proctor's allows us to use them as an umbrella. So your checks are actually made out to Proctor's and are fully tax deductible. And if you happen to work for one of those companies that also matches your gift, we like that too. So please let us know that. but we appreciate any help you can give us.
And you know, we've had a run here of promotion, but Betty, I'd like to get back to you. And you know, I'm always curious. My grandchildren call me Pop, because my kids called me Pop. I'm just curious. You've got to be like, you're like a great grandmother, right?
Yes, I am.
She's a
What-
fabulous grandmother. Oh, you meant.
No. What do your kids, grandkids, great grandkids call you? What's your name in the family?
Well, when my children were growing older, and got out, they didn't want to call me Mommy anymore, certainly not Mom. And we had a big discussion about this. And I was suggesting different things. And I said, but you can call me just about anything, but don't call me Maud. My mother's best friend was Maud, and she used to come early in the day, and she'd stay all day, and she'd smoke using one of our good dishes for an ashtray, and she wouldn't stop talking. And I couldn't even say, may I go out and play, because she was totally in charge, and I just hated her. And her name was Maud. Well, that was all my family had to hear. From that moment on, I have been Maud. Even some of the younger teachers at school would call me Maud rather than Betty. And now the grandchildren started coming along, and they call me Grand Maud. And now I rather like it, because I think I'm probably the only Grand Maud in the world. And so I have forgotten about my mother's friend, and I'm luxuriating in being the only Grand Maud on earth. Now I have 4 great-grands.
Great.
I don't. They're too young to call me anything. But I'll let you know.
Let you know. Okay. Have you got another story for us?
Oh, I have all kinds of stories, but I have one that I really love to tell, and it really is Joe Bruchek's story, but he told me I could tell you. It's always very polite to ask an author if it's okay to tell his or her story, and he said, yes, I could tell. And so this is called Used Nails. Well, we were fixing up an old house that my grandpa Jesse had made, and when we came to a layer of shakes, that's what they used to call them in the old days, shingles, and they were handmade out of cedar. And I picked up one, and it looked kind of funny because it looked as if a nail had been driven in and then pulled out again. And I thought, that's my Grandpa Jesse and his habit of saving things. Now my Grandpa Jesse saved everything. He saved piles of old newspaper. He had bags of rags. He had a great big ball of string. He also had a box, and it was labeled "String Too Short to Be Saved." He saved anything that had any possible use. He went around in a disreputable old jacket and had holes all over, and some of the holes were from his habit of smoking a pipe. And when he had enough tobacco, he'd stick that pipe still lit in his pocket. And every now and then I'd have to say, "Grandpa, you're on fire!" And then he'd put out the fire with his hands. Well, everybody knew that he was a saver. And Ray Ormsby up at Lake Desolation was fixing up an old camp up there. And he had a lot of old cedar shakes. And he was going to give them away free. First come, first serve. And he sent one of Daniel's boys down to tell Grandpa. Well, Grandpa heard about it kind of late in the day, and he was all for going right then. But Grandma said, "No, Jesse, you've worked hard all day. You're tired. You can't get up there before sundown anyway. So sit in and have your supper, and then if you want to go up, okay." So he wolfed down his supper, and then he went out and he hitched up his horses, and he put 2 lanterns on the front. Now, Grandpa always had the best horses. Some people don't care if the back of the horse makes a letter U, but Grandpa had wonderful horses. And that was an advantage when he went in to get his wood in the fall, too, because most people had to look for a nice straight tree so that they could easily get it out of the woods. Didn't bother Grandpa. He'd take any old which-way tree, put it on the ground, and he'd put one horse on the top and one horse on the bottom and just pull it on straight. And then he could carry it right out of the woods. So he went up the lake. Now, anybody that knows Lake Desolation knows that that Lake Desolation road is 10 miles straight up. And but the horses were up for the task, and they got up there, and they got up to Ray Ormsby's camp quite late in the night. And but there was a little frost up there, even though it was midsummer. It gets cold up there, and so that invigorated Grandpa. And he jumped down, and oh, he was so thrilled to see Ray Ormsby had put those shakes in neat piles on the ground, not helter-skelter all over the front yard the way some folks would. So he got down, and he began to put the shakes up on the rig. And then he saw that there was something else on the ground, and he couldn't quite see. Now, there was a big full moon, and they had the lanterns and all, but he still couldn't quite see. So he got out a pair of glasses, and he would have been able to see perfectly if they'd been the right prescription. But they were a pair that had been willed to him by his Uncle Frank. And he put them on. It was a little like walking underwater, don't you know? And so he looked down, and he said, oh, those are the used nails. Now, Grandpa loved nothing better than used nails. It could be an old brown, squiggly old thing all bent out of shape. He could pick it up, and with one blow of his hammer, straighten it out. He could use it over and over and over again. Oh, he was so pleased. So when he got all the shakes up there, he gathered up all those used nails, and he put it in his pockets. And then he got up. Now the horses had been asleep all this time, so they were full of beans. And they came down that Lake Desolation, lickety-cut, and right up across the front lawn. Well, it was all right, because by that time the frost was down in the valley too. And he came up next to the south side, and he said, boy, I feel pretty good. That little frost has invigorated me, and I've got those shakes, and I've got those nails. Well, I guess I'll start right now. So he picked up one of the shakes, and he got, where are the nails? Looked in all his pocket. Where are the nails? Could put on those crazy glasses again, and he looked. Oh, they're all over the ground. They must have come through those holes in his jacket. So he picked up a nail, got it straightened out, and another nail. Put all on the south side. Worked all night. Straightened a nail, put it up. Beautiful job. But it was getting toward dawn, and he was getting a little tired and a little hungry, too. Now, Grandma knew he'd be coming in, because she heard all this hammering and banging all night long. And so she was in the kitchen. She had the fire going and the coffee on, and the breakfast started. And so he came in, and he says, I'd like a little breakfast. And she said, your usual? Of course. So he had about a gallon of coffee and 5 pounds of bacon and a gross of pancakes and enough syrup to float a cow. Now, the Bowmans have always been known for their love of syrup. And they talk about Uncle Forrest Bowman, who had pancakes and syrup every morning of his life. He had a full-face beard, and he'd never use a napkin. But they'd take it off in the spring and boil it down and get 2 quarts of good syrup. So Grandpa sat in, and he ate his pancakes, and he said to Grandma, why don't you go out and see what I done? She said, well, I think I will. She put her shawl on, she went out, and she wasn't out there but a minute. She came back in, she said, well, those shakes aren't half bad. Why don't you put them up? What? What do you think I've been doing all night long? I've got the south side half done. Not so she could notice it, she said. I don't know what you're talking about, woman. Oh, he was so mad. He stormed out, and he looked. His heart was broken. Helter-skelter all over the front lawn were those shakes. Only one shake still on the side of the house, and that was held by one nail. And there was something peculiar about that nail, too, because it was going from the east to the west, to the east to the west. And he's looking at it, and finally it came out and went down on the ground and slithered off into a hole. And that's when Grandpa knew what he had done. He had shingled that house with nothing but frozen earthworms. It's the truth. The truth is Joe Bruchac saw it.
No wonder Joe let you tell that story.
Yeah, and you say he's a member of the Adirondack Liars Club.
Right?
Oh, I probably shouldn't have told you that before I told you the story.
The part about the hill up the Lake Desolation, that was about the only true part of the whole story.
Straight up with.
A great story. A great story.
Yes, it most certainly is, and Joe's a great teller. I was taking a course up in Alaska one time on native poetry, and the textbook now here I am, way away from the Adirondacks, way away from Joe Bruchac. The textbook that they were using in Alaska was one that Joe Bruchac had edited and put together, and that was a thrill.
Mm-hmm. Yes, well, he's published over 100 books. So.
Yes.
Joe Bruchac is probably one of the rare Native Americans with a PhD in literature.
Yes.
And he will be telling at Story Sundays with his son Jesse in early January. But Betty and I will be telling at Story Sundays on November 18th. Take Me Out to the Ball Game and Other Stories to Be Thankful For. Because between us, we have 3 baseball stories. And since that baseball season will have just ended the previous month, we thought we would do that.
So you guys have teamed up together in triple figures at Story Sunday.
Yes, so that'll be the 101st.
101.
101.
Yes.
101. Well, that's going to be fun too.
Yes.
That'll be a cause for celebration.
Oh, indeed.
Yes.
Oh, indeed.
Yes. So we only have 2 minutes left.
2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Well, I went over to the raceway and I won a little, not a lot, but enough to go on a weekend cruise. And I had never been on a cruise in my life. So I went and I got some new clothes and I went on board as soon as they let me. And I was everywhere. I went down in the engine room and I went into the dining room and I went into the kitchen and I went everywhere and I got up in absolutely in the prow, and boy, it was windy up there, and I was holding onto my hat, and a guy came by and he said, "Lady, your skirt is blowing." And I said, "I know it." "Well, lady, you ought to be holding your skirt." "I can't. I've got to hold my hat." "But lady, I can see things." And I said, "Fella, Sonny, what you're seeing is 89 years old, and this hat I just bought yesterday."
Well, Betty McCanty, we always look for a benediction, a good word and a blessing to take us on our way, and remember fondly the stories we've heard and the storytellers we've listened to, and that just about does it. Just about.
There's really no more to say.
Thank you. Thank you
for having me.
And thank you for coming and joining us in Story by Story, sharing the human experience. We hope you'll tune in again.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round.